Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I call to order this hearing of the Readiness Subcommittee of the House Armed Services Committee. Today's witnesses oversee a wide range of programs that are of great interest to this committee, including military construction, installation resiliency, housing, environmental programs, and response to emerging contaminants. Also, energy resiliency and climate change. Earlier this year, we held a hearing focused on installation resiliency, in which we questioned the uniformed leadership of the service's installation commands. Today, I will pose similar questions to the department's civilian leadership. What are you doing to ensure our installations are resilient to the specific hazards that they face, be there increasingly frequently storm events, droughts, wildfire, flooding, sea level rise, pandemics, cybersecurity? How are you incorporating climate change adaptation measures to ensure long-range resiliency of our nation's installations and to ensure taxpayers get their full benefit of the military construction investments? Are you incorporating new materials that are more resilient in your construction? Does your installation master planning incorporate microgrids, environmental charging infrastructure? That's an EV charging infrastructure, and the ability to island in the event of natural or man-made grid disruptions. Getting the answers to these questions correct is not just about addressing climate change, but about ensuring that our installations can continue to perform their critical missions without disruption. In addition to resiliency, this subcommittee has put considerable focus in the past few years on privatized housing for both military families. I assure you that we will continue until all the service members have high quality places to live, free from environmental hazards and chronic maintenance problems. However, privatized housing is not the only place where our service members live. Most of our junior enlisted service members live in barracks or dormitories. Through chronic neglect, these buildings have been allowed to fall into disrepair and create substandard living spaces for service members. We know that these poor quality living conditions contribute to poor retention. The Army announced a $10 billion plan to overhaul substandard barracks by the end of fiscal year 2030. Yet, only one barrack appeared on the President's budget request for Army military construction. In 2020, the Army announced that people were its top priority, but it seems the Army actually meant that people were their top unfunded priority. Lip service is simply not enough. With that said, at least the Army has publicly acknowledged the deficiencies in their barrack facilities. I've seen no similar statements from the other military departments. Yet I know that similar rates of barracks and dormitories in poor conditions and failing conditions exist within the Navy and the Air Force. I also look forward to hearing about the witnesses' budget request in support of their environmental programs. In particular, I'm surprised to see that the President's budget request for environmental restoration funds, the money used to conduct environmental cleanup, were down considerably from fiscal year 21 enactment amounts. With thousands of cleanup sites across the country, 698 of which are installations with known or suspected releases of AFFF and potential PFASs, contaminating the surrounding communities, I'm surprised by the lack of emphasis on environmental programs. However, with the 2024 AFFF phase out looming, the department must be increasing its efforts to address PFASs and not putting them on the back burner. With that said, I'd like to turn to our ranking member, Congressman Doug Lamborn of Colorado, for any remarks you may have.
Thank you, Chairman Garamendi. I'd like to welcome our witnesses here today to discuss their fiscal year 2022 budget requests for military construction, environmental and energy programs, as well as base and facility accounts. Over the past several months, this subcommittee has held focused hearings on many of the core issues within these accounts. It remains clear that the services are struggling to prioritize important investments in our aging and failing infrastructure. That is one of the reasons I am a strong advocate for a higher top line. We cannot continue kicking the can down the road. I look forward to hearing from OSD and the services about what they are doing to address degraded facilities. Years of deferred maintenance have made facilities inefficient, have negatively impacted readiness and retention, and left us exposed to extreme weather events. Deferred maintenance is also bad business and a waste of taxpayer dollars. In fact, federal disaster mitigation efforts can save up to $6 for every one spent. I'm particularly concerned with our organic industrial base and facilities and utilities that were built in many cases over 50 years ago. The Navy has a particularly acute problem in this area. The GAO has assessed that all 4 public shipyards are in poor or failing condition, with too few functional dry docks. The recent Navy disclosure of a Portsmouth Naval Shipyard dry dock cost growth from $750 million to almost $2 billion does not engender faith that the Navy has completely bound the overall cost of this essential Navy repair capability. As to ranges, we still have a myriad of problems that appear to be unfocused. Despite the increased emphasis on our nation's hypersonic shortfalls, for instance, I am concerned about the department's ability to adequately test hypersonic weapons. Clearly, range limitations will impede DoD's ability to adequately develop this capability. Yet not one word on this glaring shortfall in any of the witnesses' testimony. And if you look at what China's doing, they are definitely investing heavily in testing capability for hypersonic glide vehicles. Even in my district at Fort Carson, there is a continuing lack of emphasis on providing adequate ranges for the garrisoned forces. We have to do better and ensure that our ranges are ready. There are many other important issues that I'm confident will be discussed today. All services must remain focused on the privatized military housing projects. Given the recent troubles and prolonged implementation of the Tenants' Bill of Rights, oversight is critical. The services testing, cleanup, and replacement efforts related to PFAS and AFFF is another issue with bipartisan attention. The services must do a better job preventing accidental releases, of which there seem to be too many, as well as finding a suitable replacement for AFFF. With much competition for dollars in this year's budget, I want to emphasize the need for good investments that can starve off the need for additional resources down the road. I again want to thank today's witnesses, and I look forward to our discussion. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Lamborn. We'll now turn to the witnesses, and I'd like to welcome them to this hearing. They are all gathered together in some office building, I suspect at the office at the Department of Defense. The first time for them to get together, so we got them all in one place at one time. We have Mr. Paul Kramer performing the duties of Assistant Secretary of Defense for Energy, Installation, Environmental, and Environment, Office of the Secretary of Defense. And then I will introduce the others in order. So, well, let's go here. Mr. Jack Sharash, Acting Assistant Secretary of the Army for Energy Installations and Environment, Department of the Army. Mr. Todd Schaefer, Acting Assistant Secretary of Navy for Energy Installations and Environment, Department of the Navy. And Ms. Jennifer Miller, Acting Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Energy Installations, Environment, Department of Air Force. So with that, Mr. Kramer, if you would like to begin.
Thank you. Chairman Garamendi, Ranking Member Lamborn, distinguished members of the subcommittee. On behalf of myself and my service colleagues, thank you for the opportunity to present the President's Fiscal Year 2020 budget request for the Department's Energy, Installations, and Environment programs. I will highlight a few key areas. Our 2022 budget request supports our efforts to address mission requirements, ensure service members have a safe and resilient place to live and work, and also begins to address resilience challenges. We are requesting $26.1 billion for military construction and sustainment, restoration, and modernization funding to address critical mission requirements and life, health, and safety concerns within our current fiscal environment. This funding will be used to replace, restore, and modernize enduring facilities to enhance their resilience to climate events and promotes elimination of excess and obsolete facilities. We are committed to protecting the quality of life of our personnel and their families. Our primary focus here is to ensure access to safe, quality, affordable family and unaccompanied housing. Our budget includes $1.4 billion to support our worldwide non-privatized family housing inventory, which includes more than 34,000 government-owned and 5,800 leased family housing units. This request also demonstrates our continued commitment to modernizing unaccompanied personnel housing, with more than $477 million requested for 8 construction projects. With regard to privatized housing, the department continues to prioritize actions that improve the tenant experience and rebuild tenant trust. Our initial phase was predominantly focused on implementing the MHPI Tenant Bill of Rights and the NDA requirements embedded in those rights. The department has issued all policy guidance necessary to implement all rights at all MHPI housing projects. With few exceptions, all 18 tenant rights are now available. Our budget also requests approximately $3.6 billion for environmental programs, supporting activities ranging from managing critical habitat and avoiding training restrictions to addressing drinking water health advisories and making the best use of our cleanup dollars. Finally, the department depends on resilient installations. To prepare for peer competition, where even the homeland is contested, the department is addressing a change of technology, operational, and policy initiatives to enhance the use of energy in warfighting. To that end, we are requesting $4.3 billion in energy investments, including both installation energy and operational energy. This includes approximately $287 million for the Energy Resilience and Conservation Investment Program, or ERSIP, a significant increase over last year's request to reflect the significance of risks to energy systems. We appreciate Congress and this subcommittee's continued support as we work together to provide the best possible support for our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, guardians, and their families. I look forward to your questions.
Mr. Kramer, thank you very much. Let's now turn to the Army and Mr. Jack Shiras.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Lamborn, members of the subcommittee, on behalf of the soldiers, families, and civilians of the United States Army, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Army's FY22 budget request. The request works to address the challenges the Army faces in privatized housing and barracks while at the same time working to increase the climate resilience of our infrastructure. While we face a challenging task, we are making measurable and continuous progress in a challenging budget environment. We have developed and are executing complementary strategies that inform our actions. The Army installations strategy supports the Army people strategy and the Army modernization strategy, and together encompass our efforts in taking care of people, strengthening readiness and resilience, modernizing and innovating, and promoting stewardship. As you know, housing has been a key focus area. Our soldiers and their families deserve high quality, safe housing. Our focus is on fixing the privatized housing issues brought to light in 2018, while at the same time working with the privatized companies to strengthen the long-term financial health of the housing portfolio. We are conducting 100% quality assurance inspections on change of occupancy and on all life, health, and safety maintenance work orders. The Army fully implemented all 18 Tenant Bill of Rights at the majority of our 44 installations. We will execute the remaining 3 tenant rights at 8 installations by the end of the summer. The privatized housing providers are spending $1.5 billion and reinvesting another $1.3 billion on housing improvements over the next 5 years. In regards to barracks, the Army has invested $2.1 billion for construction, operations and maintenance, and restoration and modernization over the last 3 years. The Army is focused on modernizing barracks standards that incorporate user feedback and the latest technology. The Army will continue to work to increase the overall quality of housing, both Army-owned and privatized housing, as well as barracks. All of this is occurring while the Army is working to maintain and increase the resilience of our installation infrastructure. Energy and water resilience, or uninterrupted access to energy and water, are essential for Army readiness and ensuring the total Army can deploy, fight, and win. Among the threats we face, climate change is a direct threat to Army readiness and our ability to accomplish the mission. To combat this threat, the Army is proactively taking steps to address the impacts and causes of climate change and extreme weather at our installations and upon our operational forces. Army readiness begins on our installations. Through adaptation, mitigation, and innovation, the Army will work to secure the readiness and resilience of forces, functions, and facilities. Thank you for the opportunity to present this testimony of your continued support of our soldiers, civilians, and families.
Thank you, Mr. Frost. We now turn to Mr. Schaefer, Acting Assistant Secretary of Navy.
Thank you, Chairman Garamundi, Ranking Member Lamborn, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the Department of the Navy's fiscal year 2022 budget request for energy installations and environmental programs. The Department of the Navy appreciates the committee's continued support of Navy and Marine Corps installations. These installations directly enable the lethality and warfighting readiness of our maritime forces. The Department of the Navy's military construction request for 2022 includes $2.3 billion for 29 projects that invest in new platforms and technology, as well as replace and modernize an aging infrastructure. 8 construction projects support the relocation of our Marine Corps forces from Okinawa to Guam. This request also reflects our commitment to the shipyard infrastructure optimization program and to ensure the Navy's public shipyards are ready and able to support the maintenance plan for current and future submarines and aircraft carriers. To take care of our existing infrastructure, our 2022 budget request funds the sustainment of Navy and Marine Corps facilities at 80% of the Department of Defense facility sustainment model. The Department of the Navy is also requesting nearly $1 billion to fund projects that restore and modernize existing infrastructure to include naval shipyards, utility infrastructure, runways and taxiways, hangars, training facilities, and waterfront structures. Our 2022 budget request sustains the funding needed to ensure military families receive safe, quality, and well-maintained housing and fair treatment from the military housing companies that own, operate, and maintain privatized housing. Over the past 2 years, all levels of leadership across the Department of the Navy have been laser focused on improving the privatization housing experience for sailors, Marines, and their families. Although work remains, we are beginning to see improvement in the operation, maintenance, and customer service provided by our privatized housing partners. Navy and Marine Corps installations face threats from natural disasters and climate change, as well as risks to energy, water supplies, and industrial cyber control systems. Our 2022 budget request continues the Department of the Navy's commitment to installation resiliency and treats it as a cross-cutting consideration integrated into all of our installation planning. We also included in our environmental conservation and restoration, our facility design and construction, and in all of our decision-making processes. Finally, we appreciate this committee's continued attention and the urgent need to modernize the Navy's premier aviation training range, the Fallon Range Training Complex in Nevada. The Department of the Navy remains committed to working closely with tribal governments, environmental organizations, the state, county, and local community, and the Department of Interior to develop a solution that meets the desires of all stakeholders while providing our warfighters a range complex that meets their critical training and readiness needs. As directed by the Fiscal Year 2021 National Defense Authorization Act, the Department of the Navy has collaborated with the Secretary of Interior to establish the Fallon Range Training Complex Intergovernmental Executive Committee to obtain views of stakeholders on Fallon Range Training Complex modernization and information related to management of natural and cultural resources on the range. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this opening statement. We look forward to the continued support and attention of this subcommittee, and I'm ready to address your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. We now turn to Ms. Miller, Assistant Secretary of the Air Force, Energy Installations, Environment.
Chairman Garamendi and Ranking Member Lambourne and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm here with you to review the status of our installation and energy priorities to ensure the Department of the Air Force continues to provide installations as power projection platforms in support of the National Defense Strategy. The fiscal year 22 President's budget request supports the interim national security strategic guidance and lays out a plan to modernize our military capabilities. The military construction budget prioritizes nuclear enterprise modernization and combatant command infrastructure in Europe and the Pacific. The budget also funds high return on investment in operational energy initiatives and provides for the quality of life of our airmen, guardians, and their families through investments in housing dorms, child development centers, and community support facilities. Secretary Austin identified tackling climate as one of the top efforts in support of the Defending the Nation priority. Changing climate and severe weather events are a continual threat to our installations. Over the past several years, the department has seen firsthand the impacts of climate and severe weather can have on our installations. As a result, we are smartly moving forward with the rebuild efforts at Tyndall Air Force Base following Hurricane Michael in 2018 and Offutt Air Force Base following the flooding in 2019. Additionally, the department enhanced installation resilience, or the ability to continue military operations in the face of challenges to bounce back from adversity across numerous fronts. Climate and energy resiliency considerations are being incorporated into installation development plans. Last year, we published a severe weather and climate hazard screening and risk assessment playbook. This gives installation level planners a consistent and systematic framework to screen for severe weather and climate hazards and assess current and future risks. We remain firmly committed to a robust environmental conservation program, responsible environmental restoration, and protecting human health. Regarding PFAS, the department developed a framework to identify and remediate impacted areas. While there are no national primary drinking water regulations for PFAS, the EPA established lifetime drinking water health advisories for two, PFAS and PFOA. Our strategy focuses first and foremost on ensuring that no one on or off our installations is drinking water with a department-related PFAS or PFOA above that health advisory. And second, on using those CERCLA authorities to investigate, define, remediate groundwater and soil impacted by the department activities. The department also communicates and collaborates with local communities, state and federal agencies, and elected officials at all levels. Regarding privatized housing, the department, with the support of Congress, took substantive action to address concerns and make meaningful changes to our privatized housing program. Nearly all the housing companies have agreed to implement the additional 18 tenant rights. Some privatized housing highlights we've implemented in the last year include increasing program and project oversight, as well as 60 new resident advocates that directly support military families. We will keep focus on improved oversight, long-term project health, and sustainment of housing inventory to provide military families access to safe, quality, and affordable housing communities. Finally, the department continues to develop an agile and optimized approach to powering our aircraft and providing airmen with the fuel when and where they need it. We're improving enterprise-wide fuel use data collection and conducting analysis to identify areas where existing missions can be performed more effectively with fewer resources. Through partnerships with aviation and commercial industries, we identify innovative solutions to modernizing legacy aircraft and weapons system while maintaining our lethality. Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Lambourne, that completes my remarks. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Miller. We're now going to questions. We want to try to maintain the 5-minute clock as we go through this, although the chairman has some leeway, as does the ranking member. The rest of you, it's 5 minutes or out. So we'll carry on here. I'm going to do mine very quickly. Earlier, I had a discussion, Mr. Kramer, about the Department of Defense and what you are doing to carry out the president's executive order with regard to climate change. Could you speak to us about what the department, the Secretary of Defense office, and then the various departments are doing to carry out that instruction at the department, that all federal agencies aggressively address the climate change challenge? Mr. Kramer?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, before I start, I want to, take the opportunity now to thank the great team of professionals that we've assembled within the Department of Defense in very short order. So the President's executive order came out, one of his first ones in the early part of January. So we rapidly organized a team of professionals to address the executive order led at the Department of Defense level by DASD Richard Kidd, Dr. Kate White, who's an expert in climate. This is kind of their pinnacle of success, if you will. They've been training their whole career to get at this. So and where we're at within the department is all telling. And so I don't need to go into too much details about the effects of climate because I think we all realize that. But the executive order 14,008, tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad. In our response to that, we put together the DoD Climate Adaptation Plan, which is in final draft, going up to the Secretary for signature. It's on all of the department plan, and we're going to sign that in response to the EO. We've been asked not to publish that officially until all the rest of the executive branch plans get done, and that'll be no later than 1 September, or if we get direction, we'll release it early. But I am able to go through some of the highlights within our climate adaptation plan, and the primary purpose of our CAP is to integrate climate change adaptation and climate resilience across our programs, management of real property, our public lands and waters, and financial services. The department is responding to climate in two ways: adaptation to enhance resilience. These are actions and adjustments in natural or DoD systems in anticipation of or response to a changing environment in a way that effectively uses beneficial opportunities to reduce negative effects of climate, and our mitigation efforts that are being used to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The basis of our plan is wrapped around 5 lines of effort, and I'll briefly go through each one of those. Line of effort number 1 is climate-informed decision-making. What that is climate considerations must continue progress towards becoming an integral element of DoD's enterprise resource allocations and operational decision-making process. Line of effort number 2, train, test, and equip a climate-ready workforce. This LOE will help shape the department's efforts across activities related to developing, acquiring, fielding, and sustaining equipment and services. Line of effort number 3, resilient, built, and natural infrastructure. Built and natural infrastructure are both necessary for successful mission preparedness and readiness. Built infrastructure serves as the staging platform for the department's national defense and humanitarian missions. Natural infrastructure supports military combat readiness by providing realistic operational testing to combat environments and conditions. Line of effort number 4, supply chain resilience and innovation. A climate resilient supply chain is one in which the department has ensured that key suppliers and industries can still operate while impacted by climate change with uninterrupted access to key supplies, materials, chemicals, and services. Line of effort number 5, enhance adaptation and resilience through collaboration. The department will build unity of effort and mission across DoD components to exploit lessons learned and economies of scale and integrate that into existing DoD missions, not as a subset from that. And I will turn it over to my colleagues if they want to amplify any of those.
Let's stay with this. We'll go with the amplification from each of the departments, and then we'll turn to Mr. Lamborn. Shall we go in reverse order? Let's go with Air Force One. That's not an airplane. That's you, Miss Miller.
Yes, Congressman, thank you. So we have started working on our climate goals in support of the executive order and the climate action plan. And as part of doing that, as Mr. Kramer briefed, we have 2 main lines. The difference, particularly with the Air Force, I think, is some of the initiatives that we're able to implement in the operational energy arena, because that's over 80% of our consumption comes from operational energy. So we're looking at a lot of things there, some of them big items, but one of the things that we've been able to get funded this year is some of the relatively small items, whether it's the angling of our windshield wipers on our aircraft to little winglets, to things that we've been able to modify the aircraft, often stealing good ideas from industry, that all of these things that we've been able to implement for less than $40 million this year have a return on investment within the FYDP and have some real opportunities for big savings, although little investments. Some of the other areas that we're looking at with mitigation for our installations includes things like, reducing the footprint, increased demolition, trying to look at with new telework policies, is there a way to reduce the requirements when we're building new? In our acquisition policies, being able to leverage the existing infrastructure and consider that as part of our acquisition. And then some of the things that we can do with a climate literate workforce, including climate in all of our considerations. On the adaptation piece, the installation energy plans, so we're well on our way to that, and by the end of next year, we'll have 75% of our major energy consuming installations complete. We will work those into our installation development plans, and then some real good work that's been done with the pull the plug exercises. We have three more on the books. We've had great success so far and support from our leadership in doing that to try to determine where we have some installation energy vulnerabilities and water vulnerabilities that then lead to where we invest our resources and prioritize our resource to get after those vulnerabilities. I know I've probably already taken too much time, sir. Happy to answer any additional questions on those, or I can turn it over to my service counterparts.
Let's go to the Navy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Climate resiliency, environmental issues, these are very important to us. As we're following a lead from the Department of Defense, we too are working on our climate change issues. It's a national security concern for us. And as we're working through this, we think about sea level rise for a lot of our installations that are on coastal areas. When we're working to build a resilience plan, we work with local, county, and state governments to ensure that we're good partners with the community. We're also looking at the effects of climate change on things such as energy, water, and also the cyber piece of this, what it can do for our control systems. My colleague from the Air Force mentioned that they had run some black start exercises where we actually disconnect the base from the electric grid. We have done that out at Marine Corps Air Station Miramar. We've actually done that twice, and where we've turned the commercial power off there. And by the use of a microgrid and 11 megawatts on-site energy capability, we were able to support the 100 plus critical mission facilities for 14 plus days. So we are certainly taking advantage of providing energy security for things that may happen from a climate environment. And another example is that in August of 2020, during the heat wave out in California, we actually used our microgrid to prevent rolling brownouts in the California area there at Miramar. So clearly climate is a big deal for us. We're prioritizing into all the actions we do, and we're doing that to build climate resiliency into all of our infrastructure. So that includes our master planning, our development, our design and construction, and then also it's in all of our decision-making processes, just as the Secretary of Defense has directed that we need to consider climate issues in all of our processes and decision-making.
Thank you very much, and we'll end with the Army and then turn to Mr. Lamborn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So along the lines of what you just heard, what the Army is doing is, of course, working very closely with the Office of the Secretary of Defense and our sister services with respect to all things climate change. What we've chosen to do in the Army is, starting in late February, we have put together a climate change working group. This is an across the Army effort because we really see climate change having a big effect on the operating forces of the Army, training, deployment, employment of operating forces, and the need for such, as well as very obvious implications on our installation side. So the road we're on is we will have a climate change strategy that the Secretary of the Army will release probably within 60 days or so, and then we'll have a very detailed climate change action plan that will lay out a multi-year effort that covers everything with respect to the operating forces and installations that the Army is going to attempt to do so.
Very good. Thank you very much. You can be assured that we'll be following up. If it's 60 days, so that'll fit into our schedules also. In any case, this is extremely important in every way. We last year called it conservation, energy conservation, and the like. We'll follow up with more detail from you and from us. Mr. Lamborn, if you would care to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to ask Mr. Kramer about hypersonic ranges. Our nation is late in developing adequate hypersonic weapons, but is starting to expand our industrial base to support a near-term hypersonic capability, but we do have a glaring shortfall in range capabilities. And because of this deficit, industrial base partners may have to field more antiquated approaches because range limitations prohibit testing the latest technology. Do you share this concern, and do you have any solutions going forward, Mr. Kramer?
Congressman, I do share that concern, and we've had some conversations within the department on how we're going to achieve the maximum range of the hypersonic systems. I do not have any solutions that we'll talk to here, but I'm glad to have the folks get on your calendar and come down and sit down and kind of go through what those possible solutions would look like.
Okay, let's do that, because I don't want to continue losing ground to China and in Russia on this important issue. Mr. Suresh, the Pinyon Canyon Range near Fort Carson has a multitude of existing limitations, including utility easements and airspace limitations. Does the Army have a plan to address these limitations, and can you explain any corrections that you are anticipating?
Sir, I'm aware that we are working on this. I don't have the details at my fingertips, but I'll be happy to follow up with you on that, sir.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Miller, with the transfer of installations from the Air Force to the new Space Force, there will be a corresponding shift in how these installations support the space mission. For example, flying and fighting and winning in the space domain obviously requires less focus on airfields and more on critical infrastructure for launch and for controlling assets once they are operating in space. So my question is, to what extent has the Space Force developed standards and measures for assessing the readiness of its critical infrastructure systems?
So, Congressman, thanks for that question. We're actually going to be supporting within the Department of the Air Force the space installations from a secretariat, and many of the functions that our A4 logistics engineering staff performs now will be continued to be performed by the secretariat, and many of those functions by the air staff. So a lot of the prioritization, the support, the assessments will be done in the same way. It will be fairly transparent. Now, the difference will be as we transfer the FSRM and then in a couple of years, the MILCON authority over to the Space Force, then those will be prioritized within the service, but then ultimately brought together at the Secretariat for the assistance on the budget prioritization. So the readiness assessment ought to be fairly similar, and I haven't seen proposals for a transfer on that.
Okay, thank you for that update. And are the Space Force missions being reported for readiness on the Defense Readiness Reporting System? If you, maybe I didn't catch that, but yeah, for the system itself, what's the status there?
So for readiness, I can speak to installation investment, sir, but I would have to reach out to our probably J3 or our readiness experts, either an S3 or A3 on that. So we can take that for the record on how they're reporting space readiness.
Okay, thank you. Please, please let us know on that one. And then finally, what plans does the Space Force have for identifying, prioritizing, and resourcing installation military construction requirements that do align with its new mission?
Yes, sir. So right now, the MILCON process still runs through the same. So the Department of the Air Force is managing the MILCON for the Space Force and the Air Force until 2024. At that time, assuming that the capabilities exist within the Space Force to prioritize their MILCON, then they would transition. I presume that they would use much of the similar methodology that we use within the Department of the Air Force, but at that time in 2024, the Space Force will have entire control of both the MILCON and the FSRM accounts.
Okay, thank you, and thank you all for being here.
Oh, sorry, sir.
Oh, I was just, if you have something else to say, please finish. Otherwise, that's gonna transition back.
Yeah, so we will still consolidate for both the Space Force and the Air Force within the Department of the Air Force for the policy guidance, the budgetary oversight, et cetera. So there still will be the consolidating and review function by the Secretariat for both departments.
Okay, thank you, and thank you all for being here. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Lamborn. The gavel order is, well, let me find it here. Mr. Courtney, Mr. Wilson, and then we will have more beyond that. I'll make an announcement as soon as I get the order. So, Mr. Courtney, you're up.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. We had a subcommittee hearing not too long ago about the chronic sort of delays in terms of turning around ship repairs and submarine repairs, particularly the attack submarines, which the public yards have really struggled in terms of finding capacity to get those platforms turned around and back out in deployment. Mr. Schaefer, you mentioned on page 2 of your testimony the shipyard infrastructure optimization plan, SIOP, which was established in 2018. Looking at the actual numbers, which were in the budget for real construction, the Navy requested $250 million for dry dock at Portsmouth and $156 million for dry dock improvements at the Ford-class aircraft carrier at Norfolk. And that's it. And I mean, looking at the SIOP plan, which was about $21 billion of work, it seems like we're just really moving at a snail's pace. At the same time that, many of us in our committee has been pushing to expand the size of the Navy's fleet. We've still got a lot of, aging ships out there. Is this enough for us to really achieve the goal of SIOP, which, even CNO has been coming out before us and talking about the, critical piece of the spectrum in terms of the Navy's ability to get ships and submarines out there. This seems really like a meager request for the scale of the need that's out there for SIOP.
Rev. Courtney, you certainly hit on a very important program for the Department of the Navy and our ability to generate ready forces. Our SIOP plan is a long-term plan, as you probably know, that's going to go over multiple years and be multiple billions of dollars at the end. We are in the process of completing a 5-year plan to share with you all on this committee and others on Capitol Hill. We certainly have to keep in mind that we've kind of got to, I'm going to use an Air Force example. We've kind of got to build the plane as we fly it because we can't take down all our dry docks at once because we got to continue to do maintenance. So that's part of what may make our submission look like it's a little meager to get going. But this is all a complex problem, in our Naval Sea Systems Command, who does our maintenance on our ships, has laid all this out and worked with our operating forces to ensure that we've got a SIOP program that will still allow us to meet the demands of the combatant commanders for force employment going forward, sir.
Great. Well, I mean, the good news is I think you have a lot of support on this subcommittee for SIOP. I mean, I think, it took a while for people to sort of recognize, how critical this is. But now I think the interest is sky high. And, as soon as we can get that multi-year sort of view of what the plan is, I think, frankly, it'll increase people's comfort level. So, we certainly anxiously await that analysis. And thank you for your answer. And with that, I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Courtney. I have repeatedly asked for not the 20-year plan, but what are you going to do in the next 5 years? I'm not going to badger you further today, but guaranteed I'll badger you again tomorrow and the day after that until I get that 5-year plan. What are you going to do in the next 5 years? How much money do you need? Where's it going to be spent? What will be the effect of it? So I'll just let it go at that. Now, Mr. Wilson, it's your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to assure our witnesses, thank you today, that there's not badgering from the chairman. He's just making inquiries, okay? And so
No, this is badgering.
no. Hey, this is inquiry. For Secretary Miller, the FY19 NDA requires the Department of Energy to study the deployment of micro reactors, small modular reactors, at DOE facilities for energy security. And earlier this year, it was issued an executive order requiring the Department of Defense to make a report on micro reactors, small modular reactors, and their implementation at domestic military installations. What is the status of looking into enhanced energy resilience using the small modular reactors?
Congressman, we have a great interest in it. I was actually able to go up about a year ago to Eielson and physically tour the coal plant there, and then look at and talk to the folks about their excitement with the pilot program out there. So we're just getting underway on the pilot program, but we're excited to see what capabilities that provide us for our CONUS installations, and then the potential to have those be mobile for other locations.
And to me, the energy stability and dependability would just be fantastic for island installations, including an entire island, the territory of Guam. But over and over, I wish you well in looking into that. And for any one of you, I would like to receive back, you don't have to do it right now. I'm keenly interested in having from any one of you a prognostication of rising sea levels. What level of rise do you anticipate? What year and years of anticipation? Is there a variance by location on the East Coast, West Coast? Additionally, I'm interested in prognostication of rising temperatures. Again, what is the anticipated rise in what year? And then also the prognostication, since I represent South Carolina, we're keenly interested in hurricanes. What is your prognostication of Atlantic hurricanes? How many in which year? And for the 3 different issues of rising sea level, temperature, hurricanes, I would really appreciate that in a narrative, but also a graph format. And if you would please provide that to me, I'd like to see what is being done. And then Secretary Sarash, I'm grateful to represent Fort Jackson, which serves as the public face of our Army for more than 45,000 basic trainees and their families every year. Despite the efforts to have the reception barracks complex completed, it's still not being included in the budget. What is the anticipation of what can be done for the reception barracks?
Congressman, thank you for that question. Sir, I'm showing that our request has $34 million for phase 2 of the reception barracks at Fort Jackson, sir.
Well, hey, I appreciate that very, very much. That's going to be very positive. Additionally, we have sadly the effective cuts in the FY22 budget. And for Secretary Sarash, what is the long-term impact on Army families of delayed investments in the base housing and child care centers?
So, sir, we've got a real focus on housing and child care centers. I think we're moving along fairly smartly. With respect to child development centers, we were not able to include any child development centers in the military construction portion of the bill. Over the next 10 years, we're looking to invest in about 21 additional child development centers. I think that's going to provide about 4,500 spaces, and through the restoration and modernization program, about 10,500 again over the next 10 years, sir.
Well, okay, thank you again for your efforts. And back again on the different graphs as to rising sea level temperature, hurricanes. If you could get that to Drew Kennedy in my office, I would really appreciate it. 1436 Longworth House Office Building. That would be very helpful. I'd love to see those graphs as soon as possible so that we can get prepared. Thank you, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. Your inquiries were well put. Now, the gavel order going forward. Let's see here. We have Jason Crow, Mark Green, and Kai Kelehi in that order. Jason, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all to the witnesses for joining us today. In the March 26th hearing entitled Lessons Learned from Tropical or Winter Storm Uri, I asked about the MIRA Act, my Military Installation Resiliency Assuredness Act, which was included in the FY22 NDAA. It requires all major military installations to integrate into their master plan assessments of resiliency, climate effects, and extreme weather. To our knowledge, none of those assessments have been conducted by any major military installations during their planning process updates. At the hearing, I asked General Gabram when he expects the master plan updates relative to the MIRA Act to be provided to Congress. General Gabram told me that he would take it for the record and get back to me on that. We have not received any information from the Army or any service, so that that taking for the record did not actually occur as promised. So starting with the Army, when are we going to get that information? And can we expect it from every other service as well?
Sir, we're very aware of I believe it was an amendment that you personally sponsored, sir, and what it requires. I can assure you we have rolled those requirements into the master planning process within the Army. I know we're working on this. I will get you a what our plan is looking like over the next couple of years, sir.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. I guess it's good to know that you are aware of it and you've rolled it into the process. What we were looking for is an update as to how many, if any, of those master plan updates have occurred. If the answer is 0, that's fine. I think we just want an answer. If it's 1, if it's 3, we just want some sense as to where are we in effectuating that requirement. Do any other services have updates in that regard?
Sir, so I can tell you what we did in the Air Force is we did issue last year our guidance on that, and so it was done through Severe Weather and Climate Hazard Screening and Risk Assessment Playbook, which may sound fairly simple to issue the guidance, but it was a 40-page analysis that really provided good information for the installation planners on how we wanted them to assess. And it included the 16 risks that from hurricanes to fires that we needed each installation to assess against, and what criteria, mostly using our A3 weather office, would be the kind of authoritative source upon which they could rely. We did that initial screening for over 80 of our installations, and then what we've done with that now is start putting that into our installation development plan. So within the next 5 years, now that everyone's done the initial assessment, that will roll into our installation development plans. As we have that information, though, it allows us to modify, as an example of the Tyndall rebuild and the Offutt floodplain rise, to modify based on the risk assessment, not only of what type of risk it would be, but then we also assessed each as a yellow, green, red for the 0 to 25 year, and then also the 25 to 50 year look.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I appreciate that response.
And sir, from the Department of the Navy, we've actually completed one of those at Indian Island. We're in the process of continuing to train our Navy Facilities Command engineers and others on how to do that. And those two will roll into our installation master plans over the next 5 years as they're updated.
Thank you. Well, in the remaining minute here, I have a question about the DCAT, the Defense Climate Assessment Tool. I wanted views from the services, all of you, on how that process is going. I understand upwards of 1,300 of those have been used service-wide. Would love any thoughts on how it's working and whether any changes need to be made to make it a more effective or efficient tool for all of you, whoever wants to take that.
So I can let me start, and then I'll transition over to the military departments. Yeah, this actually I'm glad you brought it up, Congressman. And so the The DoD climate assessment tool actually helps answer Congressman Wilson's question too about sea level rise. And so the DCAT is just a higher level assessment tool of the most vulnerable things for an installation. Obviously on our coast, it could be sea level rise. If you're in interior, much like Colorado, your issues are more like drought, desertification, those kind of things. And the DCAT looks at that higher level, and it could go all the way down to a facilities level look, which then informs those master plans, those installation energy plans as you go forward. So we view in the DoD the DCAT model in high regard because it does provide that upper level assessment based on the authority data that we know, and then we project out 2 iterations, one 2050 and then one 2085, and then you can then plan accordingly as you move into that. What comes out of the DCAT then would be those installation energy plans, those master plans, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
Thank you, and I'd love to hear more, but I'm out of time, so respectful of my other colleagues, I will yield back to the chairman. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Crow. We may come back to this issue. There may be other folks want to ask the same question. Mr. Green, you're nodding your head as though it's your turn, and it is. Go wherever you'd like to with the questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I am confident that that will be brought back up. I'm going to focus on something different, but in this first round, and Mr. Chairman, thank you and Ranking Member for having the witnesses here today, and I want to thank our witnesses for being here. Thanks too for your service to the country. As we seek to ensure that our military is prepared to face the challenges of the coming decades and this new sort of major competitor paradigm that we're in, one of my primary concerns is that we're taking care of those warriors' needs when they're back at home station. It's a fundamental obligation with very far-reaching effects on retention and thus readiness. Unlike almost all of our competitors, America's military is an all-volunteer force. No one I served with, or Jason served with, or others on the committee here served with anyone who was forced to be there. They were all volunteers. And it imposes a challenge on our leadership, both in the military and in Congress. Our men and women in uniform are disciplined, they're hardworking, and that makes them excellent recruits for the private sector. If we want to maintain or retain talented, experienced service members, we got to take care of them. And one key aspect is making sure that base housing meets those needs, those individual needs. Base housing at my base, Fort Campbell, which is in my district, has some significant issues. Many facilities are over 50 years old. They're in poor condition, mold, mildew. I visited many of them. Other damage has accumulated over the years. There are outdated barracks there that no longer suit the demands of the units that they house. And in particular, the barracks for the 1st Brigade of the 101st Airborne Division, a very proud unit with a proud history at Fort Campbell. They're living in dilapidated, mold-filled. They're continuously moving the soldiers out, getting the mold out, putting them back in. But the way that the structure is built in its age, it just comes back. I get pictures of those barracks texted to me every month, and it is upsetting. Our troops deserve better, and I'll actually be at Fort Campbell tomorrow, looking at it again. And it's in my view that set of barracks for the 1st Brigade has got to be a priority. And Mr. Sarash, I'd like to ask you first in general to address restoration and modernization of the barracks, and then specifically if you're aware of what's going on at Fort Campbell in the 1st Brigade, and there's any plan to fix that.
All right, sir. Thank you very much for that. So we are, as I mentioned in my statement, we are very focused on taking care of people, and among those things are barracks. So in FY19 through 21, overall in the Army, we invested $2.1 billion in barracks projects. That consisted of a portion of that was military construction, and the larger portion was actually restoration and modernization. What is contained in the 22 budget request, sir, is a total of $723 million. And that's broken out between, I think it's 5 barracks projects that are military construction in scope. That's $262 million. And then we have a number of restoration and modernization projects, over $460 million of projects. So in the 4-year period, 19 through 22, That is a total investment of $2.8 billion. Now we know we need more. So the Chief of Staff of the Army is required to submit an unfunded list, and he chose to include 13 additional barracks valued at over $500 million in his unfunded request, along with the 22 budget.
Anything specific to the 1st Brigade of the 101st?
Congressman, on that, I do not know the details, but I will into that and get back to you, sir.
Yeah, but please, one of the things that we do our best to be bipartisan on this committee, but I'm looking at the spending elsewhere in this administration, a 16% increase in non-DoD spending. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle and in the other side of the building are talking about now another $3.4 trillion on, infrastructure stuff and climate stuff. It doesn't seem like there's any barriers to spending money. And yet overall, we got a $4 billion real dollar decrease in the Defense Department, and we got soldiers living in barracks that are, mildewed. And I want some assurances that this is going to be a priority in this administration over the next several years. And somebody please tell me that this is going to be addressed. I mean, 460 million in projects, and I think you said a couple of billion over a few years is a drop in the bucket for the need. And in light of all the other money that's being spent by this administration, I'd like to see these soldiers taken care of.
Congressman, I can speak on behalf of the Army. We're very focused on this. We would plan to invest approximately $10 billion over the next 10 years. And we're also at the initial stages of looking at what are there any policy changes that we can make that would maybe reduce that requirement, that would involve possibly some soldiers being able to live off installation. Our installations are very different. That might work in some installations. I don't believe.
Sure, and unit missions will probably drive that too. I get that. I like that out of the box thinking. I need you guys clamoring to your boss saying, we got to take care of these guys. If we're going to spend 16% increase elsewhere, let's at least take care of these warriors who are going to fight to defend us. And that's really on your shoulders to go to your boss and make those demands. Mr. Chairman, I yield. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green. The recapture of the MILCON money that was sent to the border for border walls, that money is back in the Department of Defense now, at least a good portion of it. The question of how it's going to be used in the Department of Defense, I don't believe has been answered in the current budget. We're going to look at that in detail, since a lot of that or most of that money was MILCON money. It may very well be that this issue of housing on base could be a use of that money. We'll see. We're looking at it in detail. Mr. Green, you're interested, we'll follow through and see where it may be going. Seems to me if MILCON is MILCON and housing is MILCON and barracks are MILCON, maybe. Okay, we'll work on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's see. Guy Kalehi, you're on.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much. And for our testifiers today, I'm going to jump over to Hawaii's 2nd Congressional District and touch on UXOs and FUDs, formerly used defense sites. In particular, one, the Waikoloa Maneuver Area, covers approximately 220,000 acres on the northwest side of the island of Hawaii. This is an area used for extensive training and artillery practice during World War II. A portion of these lands fall under the Military Munitions Response Program. And although munitions continue to be discovered and cleared today, while those numbers fluctuate, about 29,000 acres have still not been cleared to date, or have been cleared to date, excuse me. The process from initial review to an actual cleanup award takes a very long time. There is additional frustration when a surface cleanup results in significant findings of UXO to warrant a subsurface cleanup, at least in areas where development or projects are planned. Extreme weather, including heavy rains and flooding, allows more UXOs to easily rise to the surface after a surface sweep. However, surface and subsurface cleanups are currently conducted as a separate process. This makes little sense when UXO teams are already on site and can easily initiate a subsurface cleanup concurrently. So my question is for Mr. Surash in the Army. Can you shed some light on why surface and subsurface cleanups of UXOs are not allowed to be undertaken concurrently? And would it make sense to allow concurrent surface and subsurface cleanups as a time-critical removal action, especially if it's in the interest of public safety and if the lands are being used for redevelopment for a future project?
Did we lose the Department of Defense here? They've gone blank on my screen.
Yep, I don't have them, Chair.
Okay, I'm going to give the gavel order. We're going to stop your clock at 3 minutes.
Okay.
And we'll see if we get the Department of Defense back on. The gavel order going forward. Hang on a second. Will be Blake Moore, Strickland, and Luria. Wait a minute, I got this wrong. Moore, Luria, Spear. And that's corrected too. I'm getting corrections one after the other, so hang on, folks, we'll get it right. Okay, it is Blake Moore, Strickland, Luria, and Spear. Okay, apparently that's when all of you got on the screen. Normally, this problem is a problem that is unique to me, and that is I depend upon AT&T fixed wireless. If you have any other option, take it. And I will continue to badmouth AT&T fixed wireless until something is done about it. Bringing us back to the infrastructure bill and rural broadband. You guys listening to my plea? Apparently not. Okay, we're going to stand by for a few moments. Grab your coffee. Or Elaine doesn't have any questions? What is that about? Come on, Elaine. Okay, we'll see what's going on here.
I have to say, I can't believe Elaine isn't. No comments, Elaine. I actually sit with anticipation to hear you grill the Navy people. I love it.
Oh, I had an opportunity to speak to them at length this morning before the hearing, so I will cede that time to others. I got my questions answered.
Oh, come on, share and
Cheers.
tell, Elaine. You don't get these private audiences without sharing the enthusiasm that Mr. Green has for your questions. I don't know if we're still recording all of this or not, but they can mute the recordings and we'll have a good discussion here. Department of Defense has left the meeting. Yes, that's true. But my guess is they may be coming back on. Guy, I think you were talking about unexploded ordinances.
Yes, sir.
My personal experience with this goes back to the 90s when we were trying to clean up another place in Hawaii.
Yep.
And also at, let's see, in the Monterey Bay and a few other places. I was at the Department of Interior. And most of that land reverted back to the department, and the Army or the military left the department with a big burden. Fortunately, there was a good law that came along and said, no, you guys get to continue to be responsible. So we'll see what happens here, Kai.
Okay, no worries.
We shall see.
We should take this moment. Chairman, we should take this moment to let you know that the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, congressmen have all got a bet, and we all have to wear the winner of the Commander-in-Chief's trophies tie or scarf or brooch at the State of the Union this year.
When do we find out what the attire is?
Congressman, are you able to hear us through the microphone?
December.
Yeah, we got you back. We're just kind of talking about things that are important, like the Commander's Trophy. Hi, you're on. You want to finish up on your munitions issue?
Yeah, you bet. So my question, I don't know where I cut
So
off.
we have no audio. I don't know if you can hear us. We have no audio here, but we can see your video. So they're still trying to connect us.
Well, then then you'll just please stand by. We do have your video. We've got your video. You don't have our audio. We've got video and audio from the department.
Oh, no, in this room? Don't see one.
Okay.
There we go. We can hear you, sir.
Can you hear us?
Very good then. We were talking, Kai Kalehi had the floor, and he was talking about unexploded ordnances on the island of Hawaii. Kai, would you like to go forward? You've got 3 full minutes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I don't know where I left off, but my question was for the Army, Mr. Sarash, and that was asking a question about shedding light on why surface and subsurface cleanup of UXOs are not allowed to be undertaken concurrently. Would it make more sense to allow those surface and subsurface cleanups to be concurrently as time-critical removal actions, especially in the interest of public safety and if the lands are being utilized for redevelopment?
Congressman, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I totally agree with your statement, and I was able to check on this, and so it's my understanding that starting about 2 years ago, we actually moved to a process that allows concurrent surface and subsurface cleanup. At the Waiakoloa, site that you mentioned. So I just want to assure you that we're prioritizing the work with respect to the priorities of the landowners and the planned redevelopment plans to our very best service.
Okay, great. Let me jump over to the Air Force. Ms. Miller, for Bellows Air Force Base over in Waimanalo, there's been the Waimanalo Bay Recreation area is there. A big issue in the community is UXO fencing that have gone up. Fencing is cheaper than the cleanup, but this cuts off the community from traditional fishing grounds and things of that nature. And so I don't know how much you know about this. I don't expect you to know too much about it, but I'd love to get your commitment to work together with myself and the community members on finding a path for UXO cleanup at Bellows Air Force Station, and maybe get some updates from you on the issue.
Yes, Congressman. I was actually out there on 4th of July and saw the beautiful area. I spent my family vacation out there on Bellows and know exactly the area you're talking about. So I asked my team to look into this a little bit. I know we just, I think 2 months ago, had the Restoration Advisory Board that we'd looked at 4 COAs, and the initial COA that we proposed was to fence it off because of the cost associated with it. Understand the community's concerns, and I know we've received public input and are now taking comments working with the state. So we'll continue to do that. That's only a couple months old. Understanding that the Air Force chosen COA doesn't really support the needs of the community. So tracking that, and we will continue to work that, and I'll follow up with your office as soon as we have an update on whether or not we can pursue another COA.
Okay, great. I got 22 seconds left. So let me jump to the Navy, Mr. Schaefer. UXO is starting to be discovered off the waters of Lanai. I know there was unexploded ordnance off of Molokini. Do you have any status updates on this UXO's risk assessment on the island of Lanai, and also working together with myself and the local community on it?
Sir, I do not.
You've got time to answer the
Take that
question.
for the record and get back to you.
Okay. All right. Hey, thank you so much. And thank you, Chair. Sorry about the technical difficulties.
Yeah, we're not blaming you on it. That's not your problem, Kai.
All right.
It was ours.
There you go. The order going forward, Moore, Strickland, Spear. Lurius left, so Blake Moore.
It's not my fault either, but if it's going to be somebody's, it's going to be Kai's. So we'll go with
It's
that.
always the chairman's fault.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Chairman. Thanks for being here. I was pleased to see the robust increase in the FY22 MILCON budget. However, significant backlog of MILCON requirements means that many projects may never receive funding due to competing needs. It's a reality that I think all of us on this hearing will can recognize, and we'll all face it. I've seen firsthand the impact of deferred funding and facility and infrastructure investments at Hill Air Force Base in my district of Utah 1. Hill currently has a grouping of 66 buildings known as the 1200 series buildings that aren't fit to house the 4,000 DoD personnel found working in them. They were constructed over 80 years ago, initially built as ammunition warehouse space during World War II. Over the years, these buildings have been modified to house administrative functions and are in complete disrepair. These buildings not only lead to poor working conditions, but have contributed to recruiting challenges for programs at Hill, like GBSD and other really high-profile, awesome projects that Hill gets to work on. But this has been a thorn in their side. This is something that was brought up to me during the campaign even. I was aware of this well before I even was in this role. This 1200 series is a significant issue. The DoD urgently needs to find a way to replace these facilities. A recent economic analysis indicated a potential savings of $400 million over 20 years if these facilities were demolished and replaced. The replacement of these facilities through MILCON would cost nearly $750, but realistically cannot compete with limited MILCON funding. That's where I bring in the reality and where I'm sincerely hoping, and I will continue to push on this particular topic, of there are solutions, and they are based in our local economies and our local stakeholders wanting to engage. I'm proposing a provision in this year's NDAA that would expand the definition of installation support services in Title 10, Section 2679, that allows a local government to construct, manage, and operate a facility on or near military installation for a period of up to 10 years. Unfortunately, we've run into a scoring implication that has stymied this simple solution. This scoring issue is in the Congressional Budget Office. It considers such lease agreements. I won't get into the details of it, but it's a scoring implication when there's broader embrace from the local governments to help out in this regard. So my question for Ms. Miller is, can you commit to examining innovative financing options and working with OMB to facilitate local communities' desire to assist bases with their infrastructure and military construction needs?
Congressman, yes. I would love to help tackle some of the scoring issues and have argued where it makes financial sense, understanding that we will continue to be scored to the extent that we have a long-term responsibility for the project funding. I know we have implemented some creative solutions at Hill, and in fact, the building, I worked on the Hill EUL that's been really successful out there, a huge EUL as we continue to take down. I think we're in like site development lease 9 now, and working with MIDA, which you guys have been probably the leader of any of the states and in that organization and the support that you've been able to provide. I think some other creative financing besides the enhanced use lease and continuing to use the revenue for that for demolition are things like intergovernmental support agreements, potentially extending the duration of those beyond the existing 10-year statutory authority to allow us to enter into sole source non-par service contracts with the local, state, and community. But our MILCON budget is tight. You know, we spend a third on COCOM requirements, a third on new mission MILCON, and then we have less than 20% left for the entirety of all of our existing infrastructure. Hill is getting one project that was part of the B21 in our FY22, so that's good news. But yes, we'll commit to continuing to work to tackle some of the scoring issues.
And if my opening wasn't convincing enough, like I'm willing to dig into the details. Our team, full disposal of our military legislative aid. We're all in on this. The community is amazing in Utah, and we want to embrace as much as possible. So I'll just reiterate that here, and then as we continue to work together, we'd love to find solutions. There is a lot of options there, and again, I recognize the reality. So I'm not one to come out and ask, just recognizing those realities and trying to find solutions. The other question that I have, you already started talking about it, was just what other types of options might there be, doing things at a cheaper cost and accelerated timeline. I'll pause there. If you don't have anything else in response to that, I think my clock actually started a little bit late, and so I'll gladly yield back some of my time. But if there's any other suggestions or financing options, I'm open to hear it right now.
Sarah, from the Air Force perspective, no, I think it is leveraging so that the MIDA unique opportunity with the tax increment financing that they were able to do and may be able to do up at Park City, Deer Valley, that's state-specific legislation, which we very much appreciated. From a federal standpoint, other than extending the IGSA authority, The scoring would be great to get after, but I don't know that that can be addressed by statute, maybe by persuasion. So happy to partner with you on that, but I have no other creative solutions, sir.
So you're right, you got scoring on both ends, CBO and OMB Circular A11. So there's a lot of folks have worked that. We'll continue to also work it from the department.
Yeah, I appreciate your mention of EUL. It is a value proposition. It is a solid option that others could adopt as well. So if anybody ever wants to learn, she already mentioned Deer Valley. So anybody on the committee is welcome to come to Deer
I get
Valley.
the funding for it. We're on board.
I will gladly accept a CODEL to my district and would be a gracious host. So thank you for those comments, Chairman. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. You raised the scoring issue. This is a problem in most everything we do. And frankly, the scoring, as you've described, your particular problem is found in everything in the government. And we really need to address it. It seems to me very foolish and very unwise, prohibiting us to take advantage of many of the private partnerships that are out there, some of which you mentioned. And so I'll look forward to working with you on that. And I suspect there are others on this who find the same. And I don't know, maybe one or two of the folks at the table have an answer on how we can get past that scoring problem. Okay, let's see. We now have Ms. Strickland followed by Ms. Spear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses today. I will have 3 lines of questioning. First around housing, the second one about the unique role of Joint Base Lewis McChord that I represent, and then earthquake resiliency. So I have the privilege of representing Joint Base Lewis McChord, or JBLM as we call it, and it's 40,000 service members call it home. JBLM is the Army's only power platform. West Department continues to focus on the Indo-Pacific. Our Air Force personnel perform strategic vital airlift missions and are the only wing tasked with prime nuclear airlift mission. One of the issues I hear about consistently, both on post and off post, is housing. We have a housing supply crisis here in the greater metropolitan region, and the South Sound that I represent is about 30 miles south of Seattle. Between 2010 and 2019, for example, over 180,000 households moved into my district compared to 54,000 the decade prior. So housing affordability is a major issue both on and off post. And currently on post, there are 776 households on a waiting list at JBLM, while 70% of those who serve live off post. And so it's my understanding that even if all the houses on JBLM were fully renovated, there would still be a significant waiting list. So housing access is a huge readiness issue. It affects families, and we know it has to be addressed. So Mr. Sorosh, what can the department do to address the housing shortage on JBLM given the high demand for it? And what do you think we in Congress can do to help alleviate some of those issues?
Congresswoman, thank you very much for that question. So I'm aware of plans by the privatized housing provider there, which I believe is Lincoln at the moment.
Yeah.
So there is a plan to renovate about over the next 5 years, between now and 2025, to renovate just under 600 homes, major renovations, and another 500 with minor renovations. I will get back to you to see if there are any other plans involving adding new homes, from this point on. There have been homes, I believe, added since the deal was put in place. But I'll get back to you on any plans to add additional housing going forward.
Great, thank you for that. And please include metrics about how you measure what is an acceptable time for a family to find housing. I'll move on to the next question, and this is for Ms. Miller. Our testing and research and development facilities do significant work, but unfortunately they're under-resourced and underfunded. Can you tell me how the Air Force can maintain our innovative edge when we chronically underfund testing, research, and development facilities, including the precision measurement equipment labs?
Yes, ma'am. So I visited JBLM and met with the wing commander and toured, I think, the exact facility that you're talking about. So As a joint base, we work the prioritization of the military construction on that base through the Army and identify the prioritization of that through the Army. But I know that not trying to throw the ball at the Army here because we're all facing the same challenges with the prioritization being on modernization, new mission MILCON, and the combatant command support. So I can't speak to where within the Army prioritization that particular facility is, but we are tracking in the Air Force the importance of it. Even where we have a joint base, I think we're effectively implementing our joint base agreements and effectively communicating with the local commander. When we had the big, culvert, the gigantic culvert up on the airfield there, we really appreciated the Army's support in getting after and prioritizing the improvement of that facility. I think that's a good example of the joint base working like it should with the Army prioritizing a key Air Force issue.
And I have a very brief question that you can answer offline with my staff, but in March, General Gabriel said that 60% of the buildings at JBLM are not up to code for earthquake, which is a big concern. So I'll take that answer offline with my staff, but thank you very much for being here today, and I will yield my time.
Mr. Strickland, earlier in this hearing, we spoke extensively about risks at every base, and every base has a different set of risks, and you certainly have your share of them there. I recall back in the day, there was talk about what if your little mountain to the east were to have a serious mudslide? What would that mean to your community? And to the base, the answer is not good. So there are many, many different risks. Please continue to pursue these issues. Now we go to Ms. Spear. And then we'll start a second round. So if you wanted to have a second round, please let the staff know. Jackie, your turn.
Thank you. Can you, for some reason, my video has gone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. I must say that there's great frustration by members on both the Republican and Democratic side in this hearing about the inability, for whatever reasons, for the military to beef up barracks, housing, and childcare. Mr. Surash, let me start with you. The Army announced with a great deal of fanfare its $10 billion 10-year plan to bring all the barracks up to a good condition. But in the budget for this year, you're only requesting $260 million. So, you know, there's a lot of talk, but the walk isn't there. So at $260 million a year, you're never going to meet that 10-year, $10 billion. And meanwhile, many of these barracks are really unacceptable. When we were at Fort Hood, a number of my colleagues on the Codell who have served in the military said they had never been in barracks that were as bad as some of those. So why didn't you request more funds for barracks?
Congresswoman, thank you for that question. So between 19 and 21, ma'am, we invested $2.1 billion in barracks from both military construction as well as restoration and modernization. You are totally accurate on the military construction request in 22 for 262, but there's another 461 in restoration and modernization projects for barracks. So that will give us a total of about 720 million in 22. And then if we were to add up 19 through 22, that's 2.8 billion. We know we need more, and the Chief of Staff of the Army chose to include 13 barracks projects on his unfunded requirements list. That totals a little bit over $500 million, and I believe there were two of those 13 projects on the unfunded list were specifically at Hood, ma'am.
So are you still committed to 10 billion over 10 years?
We do have that plan, and we will do our best to properly resource it. We're also taking a look at other things we can do to possibly reduce the overall requirement, but we're going to do our best on that plan.
I think what you're hearing from all of us, though, is we want action. The talk is just talk. Let me move to Ms. Miller in the Air Force. You've identified more than 70 child care development centers in poor or failing condition, yet the Air Force only requested funds for one child development center in FY22. Why is this not more of a priority? We have 9,000 families that have their children on waiting lists throughout the military. And if you can identify poor and failing facilities, but then only fund one, we've got a problem. So why is there not a higher priority for this?
Yes, ma'am. So we do have in the Air Force 222 child development centers and school age centers. Of those, only one on the building condition index was poor or red. And that one has a $3.6 million renovation pending. For the other ones, we have amber, which is still acceptable. We could use improvement for 144 and then 74 that are green. So of those, acknowledge that we have not historically funded CDCs at the level that we ought to. So we stood up a working group in 2020 and had the master plan, much like the Army, and then provided a memo where we're looking at what is the prioritized list and what are those projects. You're correct that we only have one MILCON project for a CDC on our primary F22 budget, but that we have 5 total that are ready for FY22 execution, with 4 of those on our unfunded priority list. So as mentioned, we have very few, less than 20% of our MILCON funds go to existing projects, but of those we're prioritizing the very next items that weren't funded as hopefully getting funded with those CDCs. And then we also addressing this with
All right, Ms. Miller, excuse me a moment. What's your waiting list in the Air Force right now?
We have 5,100 families, 5,116 kids that had unmet childcare needs.
All right, and what's the wait time?
The average wait time was 151-day wait.
Okay, we've heard horror stories of over a year, but with 5,100 unmet, you can see that we have got to make this a higher priority. Answer for me, what is meant by a poor or failing condition child care center?
So we do a building condition index, ma'am, that assesses the physical infrastructure requirements. So anytime there's a life, health, or safety issue, those are identified immediately. None of those go unresolved. This is where we anticipate that without investment, and so a RED is a facility that requires significant investment over the next couple of years, or it's going to result in a failed facility. So these aren't failed facilities, these are poor requiring investment. So that one facility, as mentioned, has the major renovation planning with the funding lined up for that. The other ones that are yellow, though, those do deserve our attention. Right now we have 144 of those. So that's where we're trying for the prioritization to put the funds.
I would like,
excuse
me, Ms. Miller, I would like for you to provide the committee and me personally a list of all of those that are red or yellow.
Yes, ma'am.
And at what basis they're located, and also the definition for poor or failing and what comes under that, if you would. All right?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know how much time I have left since I can't see the screen. I have one more question on PFAS, if that's possible.
Well, Ms. Spear, as chairman of the Personnel Committee, why don't you go ahead and take some of your own time here? You're actually 32 seconds over, but we're going to cut you a wide swath.
All right, thank you. I'll just ask one question. My understanding is that NATO and some of our civilian European airports are phasing out a fluorinated firefighting foam. Why hasn't the department taken steps to replace AFFF with non-fluorinated formulations? I guess this would be for the department.
So, Congresswoman Paul Kramer, in case you can't see me, and so we have made some significant strides in finding a replacement for the fluorinated AFFF, and so we are cautiously optimistic we'll meet the timeline. In fact, we've done some very robust testing on alternatives that'll be a drop-in replacement using the existing apparatus, and that helps us meet the 2024 timeline. When with respect to the question about NATO and Europe, the formation they use to replace the AFFF in their apparatus caused them to replace the whole apparatus. The viscosity of the agent was much different than they had to do before, so it was just at a significant cost. Where we've taken the approach where we're going to control the use of AFFF, capture that so it doesn't no longer get into the groundwater, and then find an alternative that will listen, drop into the existing apparatus and then save taxpayers a lot of dollars. And so we have have at least 4 or 5 formations that are fluorine-free that'll drop into existing apparatus, and those have now moved from the testing to put out the fire. They've all not met our current MILDEP standards, but they've achieved an acceptable standard to put out a fuel-based fire that our fire advisory board is somewhat comfortable with that. So we've now moved into the stage where we're testing those new formations for ecotox. In essence, we want to make sure that our replacement chemical isn't any more toxic than the current one we use. In fact, what we don't want to do is create another environmental hazard, decades down the road. So we want to have one that is actually better than the formation we're using today. And that's the stage we're at now, is to go through that testing. So we're cautiously optimistic that we will have a formation fluorine-free drop-in replacement into the existing apparatus by the timeline that we've been asked to meet. Over.
Thank you.
Jackie, thank you for the question. Very good one and a good answer for all of us. I believe it is now my turn for a second round. I'm going to go very quickly here. In the testimony that all of you have provided, you have talked about the resiliency and various steps that you're taking to understand the threats that exist in your area. In response to Mr. Wilson and his request for maps of the sea level rise and flooding in South Carolina, similar information is available on various bases. What I would like to offer to the committee and ask of the witnesses here is a briefing sometime during the month of September in which those maps and information would be available to the committee members, the subcommittee as well as the full committee, so that we might all become aware of the threats that you need to meet in your resiliency requirements. So that if you would take a look at that at the department, think about how you might best inform us of these threats that exist out there. Ms. Strickland's interested in earthquakes, and I think the rest of us have our own backyard to care for. We'll do that. I offer that to the committee. We'll make that available with perhaps a week or two heads up so that you could be there. And we'll do that informally as a briefing. And nice of my staff to know about this ahead of time so that they now have 2.5 months to get it done, and for the department to prepare the maps and prepare the briefings for us. So we want to go over resiliency, and thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, along that line, so DCAT is a web-based system, so we can actually go through the DCAT model for each one of the installations and the members, as opposed to printing maps. We could actually do an interactive discussion with them using the DCAT model, and we'll take that on and schedule it accordingly.
Bring your big screen.
Yes.
I would like to do this for all of us so that all of us become aware of the extent of the problem. And then I'm quite certain that Mr. Blake and others, Kalehi and others, want to drill down and talk about meter by meter or inch by inch, as they should. So let's put that together. Let's look at September to put that together. Okay, I'm going to let my questions go at that point. We'll go back through this. Mr. Wilson, you'd be next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And indeed, I look forward to the hearings in September, whatever, and because I just have such an interest in working for the benefit of all. So, hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having this, and just keep us informed. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. I think the next would be Mr. Green. Excuse me, Mr. Calais, then Mr. Green. Unmute, Kai.
Oh, sorry, sir. I'm here. Okay. My next question is directed to OSD, and it has to do, you mentioned climate change and sea level rise, and my question is specific to the Readiness Dome, the lagoon in the center of the atoll in the Republic of the Marshall Islands. As you all know, this is an area where we did extensive nuclear testing back in the 50s and 60s. There's U.S. nuclear bomb waste that's there. The threat of sea level rise due to climate change poses a very real threat to the entire country and the surrounding region. The potential of leakage of nuclear bomb waste due to seepage through the sand base under the dome has generated concern from the highest levels. President Biden recognized this extraordinary threat of climate change to the RMI in a March 25th letter to President Kabua, in which he stated that the RMI is especially vulnerable to climate impacts among the world's nations. So I'll jump to my question. Is the Pentagon and the Secretary Austin similarly committed to addressing the threat of climate change at former U.S. nuclear testing sites? And can you also comment on the DoD's commitment to supporting our freely associated states, those allies in the Pacific, including the Republic of the Marshall Islands?
So, Congressman, yeah, so I am not familiar with the specific topic, but I will gladly take it back. But to answer your question, is the Secretary of Defense committed to climate change? The answer is yes, and he's also committed to the President of the United States. So we will honor those commitments to within the existing laws and agreements within the Marshall Islands. I've been there myself, and it's a pristine area. So I'll have my staff look into this and get on your schedule and come and give you a proper response.
Okay, great. Well, then I'll use the balance of my time just to educate on the subject. So the United States detonated 67 bombs, nuclear bombs, over 12 years with a force equal in radiation to 1.6 of the Hiroshima bombs that was detonated in Hiroshima. The dome, the Readiness Dome, which is built in the 1970s, contains more than 3.1 million cubic feet of radioactively contaminated soil and debris that were dumped into a nuclear bomb test crater on the north end of Readiness Island. And this is covered by a concrete dome. Part of the threat is that with rising sea levels, there could potentially be leakage from under the dome, which threatens the population area and the Pacific, of course, affecting fish stocks and coral reefs. It's my understanding in previous NDAAs required the Department of Energy to conduct a study, but that report delivered by the Trump administration in June 2020 did not adequately respond to Congress's concerns. The report concluded that the contents within the dome are not expected to have an adverse impact on the environment in the coming years. And so, if you would, sir, take a look at this particular issue out in the Republic of the Marshall Islands. It's very important. The compact agreement that we have with the Republic of the Marshall Islands expires in 2023. Those negotiations are happening now. But the quadriline, the importance of the Marshall Islands in the Pacific Deterrence Initiative, those agreements that we have, and the compact agreements we have with the Marshallese community is going to be really important. China is in the area. We know that, and we want to make sure that we maintain our competitive edge, especially as it relates to our missile defense testing and those types of systems we have out at Quad. And this Readiness Dome is something that when you get a chance, please take a look at, and I'd love to work together with you on it, and appreciate your attention to it. Thank you, sir, and I will yield back 18 seconds of my time.
We'll put that in your list of opportunities for the future, Kai. Thank you for bringing all the Pacific to our attention.
Okay.
We now turn to Mr. Green and the 101st Division. Mr. Green, are you still with us? Mr. Green. We'll now turn to Mr. Blake. Blake Moore, if you're up.
No, thank you. I'm doing another markup at the moment anyway, so thank you.
I'm not quite sure I understood that. Blake Moore, if you want to come on, I think Mr. Green is busy with another piece of work. Blake, you want to come on?
Sorry, could you repeat that, Chairman?
It's your turn, Blake Moore.
Yeah, I will forego any more questioning. Thank you. I'm in the middle of another markup meeting at the time, so thank you all for being here.
Okay, very good. Thank you for your participation. I believe we've run through all the members. Is that the case? Janine, any other members that are? I think we have gone through all of this. I want to end this with a big thank you to the 4 witnesses, not only for what you have done today in informing us, but really for your careers. All of you are career civil servants. Through the years, you have gathered incredible knowledge, not only in about your current job, but about a variety of tasks that you've undertaken. And you've served this nation very well. And I know you'll continue to do that as the political appointees are eventually put in place. You'll provide them with the knowledge and information and the history that you carry with you. And so for all of you, thank you. I look forward to working with you in the days ahead. We have some significant challenges, many of which we've talked about today, but many more that are on the agenda but not yet discussed. So with that, I will call this hearing to adjourn, and thank you all.
All right, thank you.